Welcome back to another episode of Sibling Showdown on the FanSpeak Network. I'm Meg, and you can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. And that's right, Sibling Showdown is back. The NFL is back. Happy week one. Happy NFL kickoff. I'm so excited. The dog days of summer were rough, but the NFL is finally back in our lives, and I am so excited. We will have the Sibling Showdown each and every week, either Wednesday night or Thursday mornings. And I'm super excited to join my sibling, Steve. You can follow him at SteveOSpeak on Twitter. Steve, how are you doing? And are you so ready for the NFL to be back?
Yeah, it is back, and thank God. I enjoy all sports, but the NFL's king.
NFL's king. And I know we've both been heavily in the best ball streets. I'll try not to talk about that each and every week, but it's hard not to because we were heavily invested in best ball content and best ball drafts, still doing best ball drafts to wrap up best ball season. So we stayed in the football streets all season long. And I truly think being in the best ball streets since like April, May has honestly, I think hopefully going to give us an early edge and competitive advantage in, the early weeks of the season. I hope, we'll see. And we'll talk about some of these guys today. So what we're going to do is we are going to, kind of talk through some basics, obviously news and information. Go over to Run the Sims. Run the Sims is a site that you can check out. You can simulate the slate. You can put in your own kind of projections and inputs as to how you think the score, usage, whatever. And then that way it'll spit out results based on, I believe, 10,000 simulations and kind of give you an idea of optimal captains, optimal flex, that kind of stuff. Ownership gets updated daily, so ownership will change. We're still waiting on some ownership news, obviously, with the Kelsey news. So we'll go over that in a minute. Then we'll talk through our favorite captains, flex plays, fades, all that kind of good stuff, and then go over to Draftkings to wrap it up. So, Steve, first of all, we have to talk about the obvious. Don't need to spend much time in it because we don't have an official word. Travis Kelce got injured in practice, hyperextended knee, bone bruise. If you ask his brother, another good sibling show. If you ask his brother, he thinks he might be fine to play. But most Twitter doctors, most people out there think it's highly unlikely he plays. We're operating under the assumption to keep it easy. Could he play? Maybe. But at this point on Wednesday afternoon, we don't know. So we're operating under the assumption that most likely he will not, and operating under the assumption that he's not going to play. Other than that, any other big news and notes that we need to consider before we kind of look at Run the Sims before we talk through some of our favorite plays?
Yeah, and so I think the two biggest things, obviously, we've known all year is, of course, Josh Reynolds suspended the first 6 weeks, or not Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams suspended the first 6 weeks. That opens things up for guys like Josh Reynolds, like Lee Freeman, like Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery down the list. And then on the Chiefs side, Chris Jones having this holdout contract situation. There's a report that maybe he could still play this week, but even if so, it would, like, if they get a deal done tonight, essentially, even if so, there's no way he's playing like a full game or at 100%. So I'm going to guess that he doesn't play because I think the last thing they'd want to do is rush him out there and him suffer a serious injury for not being, in full condition shape. So, and it's kind of the same thing with Travis Kelce. Even if he's good enough to play, if this was a playoff game, I totally believe Travis Kelce would play. But
right.
I don't know if he's playing week one.
Yeah, that's the thing when you do these shows, like news comes in, like as you're doing shows. I was on a show earlier. Check it out. It's on the FanSpeak Network. Our very first NFL betting card was fun with Spread a Stare, Tyler Hicks. It was a lot of fun. We went through not only bets for Thursday night, but for the whole Sunday slate, Sunday, Monday, everything. And I said that I love the Steelers underdog. I was like, Nick Bosa's out. And I guess Nick Bosa then is now back with the team and everything. So, news changes quickly. Check the news, obviously, right before lock, before you make any decisions. We're going off what we know right now. But the Chris Jones is another massive, massive shift and a positive, obviously, for the Lions. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to bring over Run the Sims. Go check out Run the Sims, runthesims.com or at Run the Sims, I believe, on Twitter. And again, you can put in your own inputs, and then we adjusted some ourselves, and then it will spit out optimal results based on what you put in. So obviously, looking at this, Steve, it obviously loves Patrick Mahomes as a clear faraway captain, especially with Kelsey out. you have a little more money to spend. And so I think that suggests to me, we don't know ownership yet for sure. Like, we're probably not going to know true ownership till tomorrow. But if Kelsey's out and that opens things up for Mahomes, I think that's going to make Mahomes the highest owned captain by far, in my opinion. This obviously says that he would be the most optimal captain by far, then kind of Amon-Ra, and then kind of honestly everybody else. So in looking at that, I know you're going to have interest in Mahomes, but what other captain, or what else before, actually we'll go back and then talk about captains and everything, all other plays we like separately, but on this chart in optimal rates and such, what sticks out to you the most, other than obviously the Mahomes being the most optimal?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Mahomes is always optimal, as we know. But I really like Amon-Ra. I think he's just, again, another guy who's going to benefit a little bit from Jameson Williams being out. And, Chiefs secondary is very young. They played well last year, but again, very young, very inexperienced. And, this Ben Johnson offense is just really, really good.
Built for him.
He was fifth in the league in points, third in the league in yards. Goff was absolutely on fire the second half of the year last year. So, I think it's wheels up, and they know the only way they're going to compete is to move the ball. They're not going to be selling for field goals. They're not going to be trying to grind out 17 play drives. They're going to try and get vertical and get moving.
Right. No, I love Amon-Ra as a captain, or a priority flex play, if you want to call it that. So again, go over, check out Run the Sims, put in your own projections, and it'll help you kind of make those captain decisions, lineup decisions, and ownership will keep getting updated on that as well. So now let's just go back and talk through. So favorite captains. Obviously we talked about Mahomes, we talked about Amon-Ra. Those are the obvious ones. Again, without Kelsey, having to jam in the Kelsey salary, it just opens up that's priority. I think you could lump Goff in there too. We just talked about him in this Ben Johnson offense. To me, those are three kind of priority plays that you want to consider in flex, but consider for captain and then in flex. So I think they're all in play for captain. Who would be some of your other captain plays? And then we'll get into like cheap or contrarian captain plays.
Yeah. So after those three, my next favorite captain would actually be David Montgomery.
Yep.
He comes into this role. One, the price is really great, easy to fit pretty much anything now. And even if somehow Kelsey plays, you could still fit Kelsey in there. But, he comes into this role that Jamal Williams had a year ago. Massive touchdown usage inside the 5, inside the red zone. He can catch passes unlike Jamal Williams, so he could even be a better version of Jamal Williams. And I don't think he's going to necessarily lead the league in touchdowns like Williams did, but should have double-digit touchdowns this year. Again, no Chris Jones. That helps, of course, the passing portion of it, but definitely helps running through the middle of that line also. And the Lions' offensive line they've invested so many picks into it. It looks to be fully healthy for the first time. Again, this offense could really get going. So I really like David Montgomery. And again, they're not going to be settling for field goals. If they're in around the goal line, it's 4-down territory, I think, for most of this game.
Yeah, no, I like that call. Now let's talk about, and so I like those 4 captains as like a core of the ones that, of course, are middle to expensive captains. Now let's talk about cheaper captains or contrarian captains. Give me your cheap and contrarian, then I'll kind of add to it.
So I think obviously Noah Gray becomes a cheap captain. I doubt he'll be contrarian. I think he will be popular, but it means you can fit whoever you want, and then you can get contrarian by saving money, and it could be thousands of dollars. But there's a chance that Noah Gray ends up in a kind of a mini Kelsey role. He had a good second year with the Chiefs last year. Former Duke tight end. This is his third year. They're going to throw to their tight ends. Jody Fortson's out also, so it's pretty much Noah Gray and Blake Bell. It would not surprise me if Noah Gray ends up with 8 to 10 targets, and if 1 or 2 of those get in the end zone, he could be the captain you need. So he would be the cheapest one. But my other favorites that I really like would be Sam Laporta, the Detroit rookie tight end, who I think could have a big role this year. And then Sky Moore, second-year receiver from Kansas City. He was everyone's favorite bust last year among the rookies, but He's had a great camp, apparently, probably going to lead this team in targets, not named Kelsey, and definitely this week. So yeah, I just think he could have a massive role. And, we're talking full point PPR, 100-yard bonus. Those are definitely all in play. He could have this like 10 catch, 115-yard game, gets in the end zone. Yeah, you want him in your captain.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the news on Sky Moore from the offseason is really like he should be in 2 wide receiver sets, right? And coach speak is really good for kind of a second year breakout and that kind of thing, but he really should be him and MVS in 2 wide receiver sets, right?
Yeah, I think Tony will get some eventually, but he's coming back from an injury, and while he's healthy and good to go for this game, I just doubt he's going to be an every down player regardless. And yeah, I think they're going to be in general, this team is going to be in 3 wide a lot of the year, and especially without Kelsey, I think they're very likely to be in 3 wide. So at least, if not 4 wide, some with likely having 7 active receivers this week. So
right,
yeah, I just think Sky Moore, he'll get subbed out on a few plays, probably to keep some guys fresh, but it's just a very inexperienced group. And MVS, we know what he is, and I think he maybe can be in the flex, but he's not really built for the captain, because he's not going to have like 10, 12 targets. He might have like 7, 8 targets, and you hope he catches a couple deep ones. Moore is the guy who could really rack up the catches and yards.
Right. So Moore at 4,800, that's the flex price. Obviously, it'll be more in the captain. Laporte at 5,000 are some of those cheaper ones that you're considering for captain. Any contrarian captain, we know, again, well, I guess I actually think both of those would be contrarian captains now, given the nature of the slate, because again, I think it's either going to be Noah Gray, jam whoever you want, or it's going to be Patrick Mahomes and Noah Gray and play whoever you want from there. So I think those are going to be the 2 most pop. And then of course, Amon-Ra, I think will come with a very hefty ownership. So I actually think Sky Moore and Laporta not only are cheaper captain options but I also think they could be contrarian captain options. And we obviously need to get ownership percentage on that. But I spoke to on the Bet Show, I brought up Sam Laporta first touchdown for fun, it's like, I think 23-1 or something like that. And then I think it's plus 290 anytime touchdown, just fun, bets. Obviously we have some, all sorts of good bets on the NFL betting cards, to check that out. But, I like Sam Laporta for anytime touchdown. Yeah, I've been bullish on him all off season, drafted him. We both drafted him a ton in best ball, or a ton of exposure to him in best ball. Why? Because we knew from the jump that, he had the edge on the tight end 1. Yes, he's tight end 1. And let's look at last year, Detroit Lions tight ends scored 12 touchdowns. And you say, oh, well, Hawkinson was there part-time. Hawkinson only contributed 3 of those. 9 touchdowns went to likes of Shane Zylstra. I can't even say his name correct. James Mitchell, Brock Wright. I mean, come on. Sam Laporta is an athletic tight end. Yes, he's a rookie, but he is the tight end 1 that should get all essentially the tight end reps. So, I think there's a lot to like there, and, the way that they target the tight end in the red zone and in those high value, high leverage situations. So that's why I think both you and I like Laporta at this price, whether it's flex or captain. Any other captains before we kind of move on to other kind of potential talking points?
Yeah, I think you could talk yourself into like a Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, I'm not as high on it. I think he actually will probably be fairly popular as a captain.
Yeah.
And while I think he will get utilized and probably get a good number of targets, I think Montgomery will have most of the red zone work. Most of the rushing yardage work. So, Jahmyr Gibbs could have like that, kind of like the lesser half of what we see from Christian McCaffrey without the touchdown upside. Those games where McCaffrey has like 12 carries for 40, 50 rushing yards, and then 8 catches for 80. You don't get the bonus and you don't get a touchdown. It's going to be good, but is it good enough for a captain? I don't know.
And don't you think, he could be a flex consideration, but depending what his ownership is, I think he could come in at higher ownership than Montgomery. And I think I think he could be used as a weapon. I'll consider him for the flex, but not the captain.
And the line that I just gave is kind of like the upside without a touchdown. Like, what if he only ends up like 4 catches? Then you're.
I was gonna say, couldn't you see him in just the DeAndre Swift role, last year, which, yes, that's explosive plays, but, he's not getting the high value touches near the goal line. Yeah. If he scores, it's going to have to be from, probably outside the 20, explosive plays, that kind of stuff, which, is in his bag. I'm not saying it can't happen, but okay, now let's talk through kind of the values are kind of obvious on this slate. So I'm just going to run through and we kind of each talk, but there's one or two that I think I am going to consider. Noah Gray is the clear and obvious value, but he's going to come with ownership, I'm sure. But again, I'm still going to play into that and just get different elsewhere. You don't have to be contrarian everywhere. So I'm fine with that. The other two, we kind of touched on Laporta being one at 5,000. And then Josh Reynolds is only, he is only what, 2,800? Yeah, Josh Reynolds, 2,800. I mean, this should be the wide receiver 2 on the outside. Wide receiver 2 to Amon-Ra, and on the outside has a connection with Goff. So like Reynolds, like Laporta, like Noah Gray. The other one to mention is, well, you mentioned Khalif Raymond. I don't have a ton of interest there, but he is dirt cheap at about $800. $800. The other one to mention is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He got used in the preseason, and to the point where I think he could get mixed in more than people think. Pacheco's coming off, I believe, a shoulder surgery this offseason. I don't know that he's going to come into full workload, and Andy just, he rides kind of hot hand with the running back position. So I never am super bullish on using Chiefs running backs because, it's one thing in best ball, but in DFS, it's tough. It's a tough sell because it's hard to know, really what their role. Let's put it this way, on Chiefs showdowns last year, I could never really get the Chiefs running back situation right. I was never on kind of the right side of that. And, sometimes it was, I think early in the season, CH, sometimes it was McKinnon, obviously for a long stretch. And then, Pacheco
had a couple weeks.
Had a good couple weeks. So, they all kind of had their share of times where they kind of popped and you wanted them. And so that's why I want to consider that because I think he's cheap and I think he's going to get overlooked and low. So I like that. Now let's talk fades. I don't think this is a site or a slate where, I have to have massive fades, but I will say there's guys that I'm a lot less interested in and kind of still deciding. We kind of talked about a pre-show, and the biggest ones are Tony and Pacheco to me, that just not sure that I have a ton of flex exposure. Obviously not interested in the captain and not interested or lack interest in the flex even because I think they're both going to come with ownership. They're both not cheap. And I'm just both not sure their role. Tony's going to be limited. He's coming off an injury. And yes, he gets those high value touches. His targets per route run are ridiculous. That kind of, he gets put in those high leverage situations. So, I get it, but he's not cheap and he's coming off injury and, I don't know what his ownership will be. And then Pacheco, again, coming back from surgery this summer and again, not cheap. And I think he could come with some ownership. So where do you stand on those two?
Yeah. And that just going back to what you were saying about CEH, part of the reason why I think we're both higher on him is that we feel like Pacheco is, coming off the injury, and sure, for the course of the season, Pacheco is probably the running back you more want. But this week one, I think CEH could get utilized, and he's going to probably get maybe more targets than Pacheco. I think McKinnon still leads in that department, but you just have those ways where, he just racks together a couple carries, a touchdown, a few catches, and he's well above, he had 20 points a couple times last year. And that was a year where he was dealing with injuries. He was coming off an off-season surgery and missed most of the year. So we do know the Chiefs backs can be utilized. But it's a complete guessing game. I'd rather go with McKinnon and CH because they're cheaper. And just Pacheco coming back from this injury worries me. And same is true with Tony. Again, Moore and MVS are probably going to be out there just as many plays and just as many chances of, being Mahomes' guy this week, if not more so with Tony coming off the injury, and they're cheaper. I'm going to go those routes. And then the other one and I think you didn't mention it because we just totally have written him off, is Marvin Jones. He's priced higher than Reynolds and Raymond, but he's probably will end up fourth on the team in wide receiver.
Yeah, that's sort of kind of the
routes run. I mean, he might be in some more like blocking situations.
Right, but that's kind of the reports out of camp is he's kind of like the fourth guy right now in the receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he'll get utilized to, kind of filling in for all three of those guys. But I think the primary three wide receiver sets will be, Reynolds, Amon-Ra, and Raymond. So with Reynolds and Amon-Ra being the top guys.
Yeah, agreed. And your take on Gibbs is that you might have, again, no interest in the captain, but maybe in the flex, sparingly. That's kind of my take on Gibbs too, is, it's first game. Again, I just think he's going to have to get there on explosive plays, which I think he can do. They call him kind of like a weapon. And I do think they could use him in like, could you see them like him splaying out wide sometimes and that kind of stuff?
Definitely.
Yeah. So, I do think he could be used as, third, fourth receiver as well. So, that's what's so interesting about him and why I do still want to consider him in flex. So my bigger fades would probably be, like Tony Pacheco and lower, but I don't think a lot of people are interested in Marvin Jones. And then I think, we talk kickers and defense. This isn't a slate I'm looking to target kickers and defenses. There are plenty of showdown slates where I am high on kickers. And listen, Butker's, one that I have gone to many of times. But this is not a slate. I see these teams, even if Kelsey doesn't play, I see these teams punching it in. I don't see this being like a field goal fest. And I don't see this, being a defensive slugfest either. I know sometimes out of the gate, things start slow, but what was it? 2 years ago, you chopped the week 1 showdown and it was Bucks, Cowboys. Yeah. And it was just like a absolute shootout, right?
Yeah, tons of points.
Yeah, tons of points. What was it? Probably like total of like 75, 80 points scored.
And I think it was like 42, 35 or something like that.
Yeah. Again, with the Kelsey situation, maybe it's not quite that, but like I see points scored. So like my take on the defense kickers is I don't have a ton of interest. If a build like just lands me on like a kicker, maybe, but like it's certainly not a priority flex play for me.
Yeah.
And just don't see, obviously any fluky thing can happen where, maybe one of the kickers kicks 3 50-yard field goals or something wild, or, the defense gets a pick six or, anything can happen in showdown, but I just don't have a ton of interest. And sure, they might be lower owned on this slate, but I just think there's so many other good plays. And this is a slate where you just want the best plays when you've got 6 available to you. So I don't think this is a slate where you're kind of struggling for good plays. That's when I lean into the kicker defense more.
Yeah. And what I'd say to that is, one, even in an outcome where one of the kickers gets multiple long field goals, they're still likely outscored by the guys around them. I mean, Sky Moore, MVS, Laporta are only a couple hundred more than Butker. And then below them are the guys like CEH, Reynolds, Gray, Richie James, and Khalif Raymond. So, I think those guys one or two of those guys on each side are going to be outscoring these kickers, even in the outcome where they do kick a couple long ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, now let's do the fun part. We're not going to build a whole lineup because we can't, but let's just kind of build a shell of like kind of some of the guys we talked about and who we like. So do you want to do it? Do you want to put in our favorite captain, our favorite best ball play? Okay, that would be Mr. Sam Laporta at $5,000. So in the captain, $7,500. And the reason for this is what we talked about earlier, especially if Noah Gray captain becomes popular. Mahomes captain becomes popular. A guy like Sam Laporta captain, I can assure you, is not going to be popular. So I think this is a massive, massive ownership leverage in the big contest. So I love that call. And I think I think he's just going to be utilized and targeted in the red zone. So I think the next option obviously makes sense to put in the clear Mahomes piece because that is the clear optimal play, but I'll let you go next.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes is obvious. The next guy that I want to also make things unique, because like we are trying to make things a little unique, is pairing Laporta and Montgomery and really trying to get all the touchdown equity from this line.
I like that. I like that. I think this is a lineup where you can, we're only going to do 4, but I think this is a lineup where you can do both quarterbacks. Listen, with, I believe it was something I wrote down somewhere. Yeah. Chiefs, when they don't get home on pressure, and if they don't have Chris Jones, that's questionable about their, getting pressure. Excuse me, on the quarterback, they rank 26 in passing yards allowed, I believe, when they don't get home on pressure. So I think this is a game where Goff can kind of continue last year's success and, have put up a statistically high, number. And then you mix in with, especially with Montgomery, not Gibbs, I think that makes it unique too. So we'll leave the rest open. Obviously, guys like, Amon-Ra, Gibbs, those are all considerations up top. And then we talked about guys like Reynolds and CH down low, then it's just kind of the combo you want, but it leaves 7,150 still available to you.
A lot of ways you can go with it.
A lot of ways you can go with it. And you can also leave money on the table. I think this is a slate where if you use a chalky captain, you can leave money on the table. If you do a captain even like this, you can leave money on the table. So I think there's a lot of ways you can go with it from here. And that's what I like about kind of this shell. So, okay, I think this was a good kind of starting point. And that's what it is on a Wednesday, Thursday, you get all the last minute news and, you really look hard at ownership and you make your decisions from there. That's kind of my final thoughts. What are your final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, I think, again, good to be back with the NFL. And I think we should expect the fireworks in this game, even without Kelsey. This was the number 1 and number 5 scoring offenses last year.
Yep.
Number 1 and number 3 in total yardage, and the Lions only got better as the year went on. So, and like I said, they have a lot going for them with their O-line being healthier. They probably have better weapons this year with guys like Laporta and the running back pair versus the running back pair they had a year ago. So, yeah, expect a lot of explosive plays. I really like this to be a big time shootout.
I sure hope so. I think it would be fun for everybody to, NFL kickoff for a shootout. I think it would be fun for Showdown, fun for sports betting, fun for it all. I just check out our articles on fanspeak.com. Steve and I will have a written version of basically what we talked about, which will be a Showdown survey, kind of our favorites of everything, captain, flex, fades, lineup constructions, that kind of stuff. So we'll have that on the site tomorrow morning. Again, check out our bet sheet, NFL betting card. I'm going to have a same game parlay article up with my favorite same game parlay. So lots to check out on fanspeak.com. NFL is back, baby. I can't wait. Let's make some money. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.